Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a really big and honestly often misunderstood philosophical concept, moral relativism.
You know that feeling, right? That sense of difference is the exact spark that kicks off this whole conversation. It's really the starting point for this entire philosophical journey.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with what it is, break it down, look at the big debates, check out its history, and then wrap up with why it's still such a huge deal today.
Okay, let's get right to it. What are we really talking about when we use a term like moral relativism? Let's pin down a solid definition.
So, in a nutshell, it's this idea that there isn't one single universal moral rulebook that works for every single person, everywhere, for all time. What's considered right or wrong isn't some kind of fixed cosmic truth. Instead, it all depends on the context, the culture you're in, or even the historical period.
And that's maybe the first and most important thing to get straight. This isn't just one single rigid theory. It's more like a family of ideas, a big umbrella that a bunch of related positions huddle under.
All right, next up, to really get a handle on this, we need to peel back the layers and look at its three main flavors. Okay, this table is super helpful for breaking it all down. First up, you've got descriptive relativism. This is just an observation, right? It's basically saying, hey, I noticed that different cultures have different morals. It's a statement of fact. Then we go a level deeper with meta-ethical relativism. This one's about language. It says the very words right and wrong don't have a universal meaning. And finally, there's normative relativism, which actually tells you what to do. It says because our morals are different, we should be tolerant of each other. The really cool part, you can believe in one without believing in the others.
And this is such a critical point. You can totally look at the world and say, yep, different folks, different moral strokes. That's just being a descriptive relativist. But that doesn't automatically mean you have to sign up for tolerating everything another culture does. That's a whole other step.
And this is where things get really interesting. We're now at the absolute heart of the debate, the real philosophical tug of war here.
So you've got two big camps. In one corner, you have the relativists saying morality is all about context. In the other corner, you have the moral universalists. They're arguing that, nope, some things are just plain wrong or right, no matter who you are or where you live, that some fundamental moral truths actually exist.
Now, the critics of relativism have some really tough questions, right? I mean, if there's no objective standard, how do you ever settle a moral disagreement? How can you possibly condemn something like slavery if a culture just says, hey, that's our way? And what about someone who belongs to multiple groups with clashing values? Which moral code are they supposed to follow? It gets tricky fast.
Yeah, the philosopher Simon Blackburn really hits the nail on the head here. He points out that if everything is relative, how can you ever referee a disagreement? It's like saying both teams can be right according to their own rules. That works fine until the two teams have to play each other.
But on the flip side, you have thinkers like Richard Rorty. He basically said, hold on a minute. The word relativist often gets thrown around like an insult. He argued that the people being called that aren't saying anything goes. They're just admitting that morality is messy, and there isn't always a simple paint-by-numbers solution to every problem. And this whole debate is nothing new, not by a long shot. These ideas have been kicking around for thousands of years, with roots going way, way back. Let's take a quick trip through time. You can trace this back to ancient Greece with Protagoras saying, man is the measure of all things, a radical idea. Fast forward to the 1700s, and you have David Hume saying our morals come from our feelings, not from some cold, hard facts. Then, of course, there's Nietzsche, who just took a philosophical sledgehammer to the whole idea of objective morality. And more recently, anthropologists like Ruth Benedict went out into the world and actually documented how incredibly different moral codes can be from one culture to the next. So you can see how this idea has been building and evolving for centuries.
Okay, so that's the whirlwind tour of history, but what does it all mean for us right now? Why should we even care about some abstract philosophical debate? Well, to get at the answer, we first need to clear up one last, really common point of confusion. People often mix up moral relativism with something called ethical subjectivism. They sound similar, but they're actually worlds apart.
And this comparison makes it super clear. Look, moral relativism says morality is tied to a group, a culture, a society, whatever. It's about shared rules. Ethical subjectivism, though, says morality is all about an individual's mind. It's based on my feelings, your opinions. So one is about the we, and the other is about the me. That's a huge difference. So let's wrap this up.
What are the big takeaways? First, moral relativism isn't just a lazy anything-goes attitude. It's a really complex idea that forces us to ask tough questions about our own beliefs. On the one hand, it can push us towards being more tolerant and understanding of other cultures. But on the other hand, it creates this massive challenge. If all morals are relative, how do we find the ground to stand on when we want to condemn something that just seems flat out wrong?
And that's the big question we're left with, isn't it? This whole thing isn't just some dusty old philosophical argument. It hits right at the heart of one of our biggest modern challenges. If morality is relative, how in the world do we come together to agree on and enforce something like universal human rights? That's the puzzle moral relativism hands to every single one of us.